Well, g'day guys, and welcome to the podcast. This is Life in the Peloton, of course, and I am Mitch Docker. This podcast is being brought to you by our proud partners, Rapha. And Rapha, you know I love talking about their kit. You know how much I love talking about cycling kit and wearing it, that loud stuff. But Rapha, they're all about the culture. They're all about the tradition. When Simon Mottram started the company, he was really concerned about painting the picture of this beautiful sport, cycling, making cycling the most popular sport in the world. That's his motto. And that's our motto here at Life in the Peloton too. Breaking down what's going on in the Peloton, educating everyone about the sport of cycling. I love working with them, not only with the cycling kit and wearing it out there, but of course in the background and telling the story of cycling. Like I said, I'm over here at the heart of cycling in France, the Tour de France. The big race is on right now, and I will be reporting to you every day on the cycling podcast. So if you haven't heard enough of my voice after this podcast, head across to the Cycling Podcast and you can hear me chatting with my old friend Lionel Burney and Francois Tomaso, breaking down each stage, what happens, of course having a few beers and a couple nice meals along the way too. It's a pretty fun time over here, so get across and check that podcast out as well. This episode I've got for you this week is an absolute cracker, the Leadout Men. Now you may know exactly what I'm talking about or you may not. The episode's going to explain what I'm talking about, but I'll give you a little bit of a setup because this is a job that I used to do when I was racing professionally. The lead-out man, the guy that propels the sprinters to the line. It's one of those jobs you sort of see on TV and you don't understand how complex that role is and how important it is. Of course, I look on it with a little bit more of a favourable eye because that was my job, something that I love to do. What I've gone and done is I've gone and collected 6 of the best lead-out men, in my opinion, out there from all different eras. And I've had a chat to them and I've tried to break down the job, help me understand what they do, why they fell in love with the job, the tricks of the trade, and help you guys understand what they do to propel those sprinters forward to win the stages here at the Tour de France, there at the Giro, over at the Vuelta, in any race. It's such an important job and I feel like it never really gets explained properly. I get to hear from Roger Kluge, the big German who worked with Caleb Ewan, Brett Lancaster, a good friend of mine who worked with Alessandro Petacchi. You've got one of the best in the business, Mark Renshaw, who was Mark Cavendish's most famous lead-out man. The Dutchman, Koen de Kort, who was working with Marcel Kittel and John Degenkolb. Freddie Rodriguez from way back when. He was the man working with Robbie McEwen. And then I've got him, the best in the business right now, Michael Morkov, Mikael Murku. He's the guy that you see working with Fabio Jakobsen right now. He is one of the best lead-out men there's ever been and undoubtedly the best lead-out man around right now. Like I said, I'm going to be on the road now for 3 weeks following the Tour de France. And I have with me my AG1 travel packs, which are portion size, really easy. You open them up, you pour them into the shaker, and away we go. No mess, very, very easy to travel with. AG1 is that all-in-one. It's a comprehensive blend of vitamins and minerals, probiotics, and food complexes. Now, while I'm over here, I'm heading out for a run each morning because I don't have my bike with me. As soon as I get back, I smash my AG1, I go straight in, have a cold shower, and I feel $1,000,000. It's the best start to the day. AG1 is everything you need to top up when you're traveling. When you're eating out every night, drinking a few beers, living out of a suitcase, you're missing that wholesome, good stuff. And AG1 is right there to top you up. AG1 is not only for just elite sports people, clearly. It's for everyone who just wants to feel good and make sure they're covering their nutritional bases. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, AG1 is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Now go across to drinkag1.com/lifeinthepeloton. That's drinkag1.com/lifeinthepeloton. Now guys, I've set this episode up for you as a real educational episode right when the Tour de France is on, so you can sit back and understand what is going on when we see these sprint stages, when we see these intermediate sprints, so you can see how important that role is for the guys who are sprinting for the win. I hope you enjoy this one. I had a lot of fun recording this one. There was heaps of audio. Sit back guys and enjoy the Leadout Men.
Hey, I'm Mark Renshaw. I was a professional cyclist for 16 years. I rode for some of the biggest teams in the world. Probably most notably was HTC High Road alongside Mark Cavendish. My main role was a lead-out rider, and within that role, it's basically to deliver the sprinter as close to the line as possible.
All right, Mark, Ren Dog, as I like to call you, mate. How do you become a lead-out man? How does it all start? Because when we go across to Europe, we're aspiring to win races, not to lead out other people. How do you become a lead-out man?
Well, it's a pretty fast transition because once you make it to the professionals, it's all about winning races. And especially as a sprinter, as you know, you have to win. And if you don't win, you get 1 year. And if you don't win in the second year, then you're chopped. Basically, I got to the end of my first 2-year contract with Le Francis de Jeu. I didn't win a race. I'd had multiple seconds, thirds, always in the top 10, but just no wins. I got a second chance, a lifeline at Credit Agricole. I started to win some races, but they started pairing me up with Thor Hushoff about the same time. And once they paired me up with Thor Hushoff, an absolute legend of the sport and a really good guy, we started to click together. I started to do some positioning in the final, moving more away from trying to win the second tier races as a young sprinter. And I got the chance to do some bigger races with Thor Hushoff. And it was just a role that really came to me. It's something I found really easy. The positioning side of things, it was just, I could always be in the right position, but I just didn't have the legs to win. And I kind of just fell in the role of being a lead-out man because I was always there in the right position, but never able to win. And I just transformed that into the lead-out role.
It's funny, isn't it? Because as you're saying it now, I'm getting excited about that job. It's something that once you find your niche in the pro peloton, you have to love it and be excited about it because that's sort of what prolongs your career. You sort of, within your own colleagues, all the other lead-out men, you get the kudos. It's like, mate, I saw that yesterday. You know that. And that was enough for me in that role. It sounds like for you, you could sink your teeth into that more than aspiring to win, like you said, second-tier races. Like, hang on, I'm actually really good at this. I'm going to the biggest races and I'm important. Is that how it was?
Absolutely. You have to love the job. It's too hard a job. You don't get the big accolades. I never got to stand on the Tour de France podium, even though I played a part in so many victories. So to look back, you have to appreciate that. At the time, I was dead set just on being the best lead-out rider. Pretty much I'd ride through a brick wall. If they told me to go through a brick wall to lead out, I'd do it. And we saw that throughout my career. And it was just 110% commitment for the team. There was times, sure, it was tough. Probably tougher now that I look back and see there's so many times that I was close to winning and didn't win. I also look back with really fond memories that I was so successful and we had so many victories.
I'm Brett Lancaster, former lead-out man for Alessandro Petacchi and Thor Hushoff, and early in my career, Australian rider Graham Brown. I don't know really how it happened, but as a junior growing up, always raced and won races myself, and I guess it was because I just didn't have that real top-end 5-second power, like that fast twitch, your Mark Cavendish's or whoever it was, Petacchi's. However, my 1 minute power was extraordinary. I think while I do know one stage of the tour, I just did end of a stage leading out Matt Goss in Green Edge, just shy of 1,000 watts for 1 minute. So that type of power curve, it suits a lead-out man, and no one's coming past you with that sort of that power, or only the very best. Maybe it was about the pressure too, Mitch, in not having that over you, but I always tried to execute best lead-out possible.
My name is Koen de Kort, pro for 17 years from the Netherlands. Raced for a couple of different teams, but ended up with Trek Segafredo and mostly was a lead-out man in my career. For me, I started with Liberty Seguros with Alan Davis, and I knew that I could sprint pretty decent myself, but he was obviously a much better sprinter than I was. So he asked me to help him and try to position him in the final, and it turned out that I was actually pretty good at that. And even when I got a chance to sprint myself, I was definitely not good enough as a sprinter, but I think I developed as a pure lead-out man then and really started training for it and making sure that I was good at just that job. And I think that's how it sort of came about. Just at first I thought maybe I could do some sprints myself, but yeah, that didn't work, and lead-out's just the way to go forward for me.
Did you initially like the job, or was it something that you became good at and then realised, actually being in the pro peloton, I realised you've got to be really niche and be good at your job, or was it just something you really enjoyed as well?
No, I definitely enjoyed it. I always, from the start, I really liked it. You're just 2 or 3 or 4 guys. In the beginning, it was obviously just 2, but then once you start to get a train, it's a few more guys that get thrown in. But in the beginning, it's just 2, and it's 2 of you against the world kind of thing, and you have stories to talk about after the stage about what happened, and I banged handlebars and came underneath in the corner, and it's kind of this cool thing that you do with 2 guys almost going to the war, in a way. So I think that was what I always really enjoyed about that.
I'm Freddie Rodriguez, also known as Fast Freddie in the cycling industry. I'm a 4-time U.S. Pro National Champion. I've got 9 Tour de France's. I've competed in 3 Vueltas, one Giro. How did it start? I mean, basically, once I hit the European scene, I think I came on the Mapei. I was mostly a sprinter before that as a main guy at Saturn cycling. And I had Tom Steele, I had Zanini, you name it. I had some amazing riders, and that was my first job, was to help them figure out how to win races. And so I quickly adapted to my role. And initially, I was hired to win races because they saw me win at Tour Langkawi, and I won, I think, three stages. The points race, the points jersey, and so I came in as a rider that was supposed to win, and I did win. But again, to get to the bigger races like the Tour de France and stuff like that, I had to take a lieutenant role, which I was like, I signed up right away. I was like, we're going to the tour, let me in. It's like, so I mean, I had opportunities there too to race for myself, but definitely that was kind of the direction it went.
Hey guys, I'm Roger Kluge from Germany. I'm a lead-out guy, and in the past couple of years I lead out Caleb Ewan, Heinrich Hasler, Lee Howard, Matteo Pellucci, and also John Degenkolb and Marcel Kittel. Yeah, still in the beginning of my career, let's say 2010, I joined or became a pro cyclist, joined Milram, and I won actually 1 or 2 races this year. I think a one-day race in 2010, a German one. So I was kind of fast guy, and still, I got a chance in Shimano, 11 and 12, when we were even teammates. I get here and there a chance, but then by Kittel came in, it was clear that he's faster. So he just pushed me away, but that's okay, Marcel, no worries. To win again, I clearly saw or accepted, now I'm not fast enough. I'm fast, but to win those races, those bunch sprints, you need that extra little bit, whatever it takes. So, and then from 2014, I joined IM, and I was clearly in that role, okay, I help the other sprinter. So first year it was Heino or Pellucci, Matteo. Then later in 15 or just 16, Lee joined also Howard. So we did it for him. And from this moment on, I was fine and happy, okay, to accept the role as a lead-out man and working for the other, and still being happy to do a good job, because it's an important job, necessary, because do it by yourself, it's impossible.
Michael Morkov. So I've been pro cyclist for 15 years. While I was in my first years, I was more like trying to become a climber. Then I realized that was not really my call. So I turned more into sprinter type, became a lead-out man, inspired by some of the Peloton's best. And over the last years, I worked with some of the best sprinters in the Peloton, and we succeeded with already quite a couple of stage victories in Tour de France. I also managed to crown myself as an Olympic champion in Tokyo 2021. I grew up on a Danish team, Saxo Bank. There was a team with a lot of focus on GC and never a sprinter. So obviously I was fighting always to get into the big tour teams and being good at climbs. But when my time was over there, I had a very good connection with Alexander Kristoff. He was back then top rider riding for Katusha, and he got me over to support him in the classics and in the lead-outs. And as soon as I signed with the Katusha, I realized that there was still a big potential in the bunch sprint. It was not that organized. There was only very few guys on the market who really understood how bunch sprint was supposed to be done. So I started to look up at it, and I just tried to analyze it and find my way in those bunch sprints.
So you actually looked at it as a bit of a challenge to go, hang on, there's a gap in the market here. I can probably figure this out and then hone my ability to it. You didn't just naturally fall into it as a physical ability, like most other lead-out men.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, as a rider, I always knew I had a fast finish, I always knew if I arrived in smaller group, I would probably be one of the fastest. During my first year as a rider, I also sometimes got the chance to sprint, but never got any support, so it's quite kind of hard to become a sprinter if nobody really believes in you. So I was just sprinting whenever I had the chance, and sometimes I was not in positioning, didn't really work out. As I say, I get the chance with Alexander, who was top classic rider, sprinter at that time. I was just signed to support him. He was collecting a team around him. And then, in the winter towards that 16 season, I started to look on YouTube, and then I really realized there was a few guys back then. Maybe I will miss some, but of course, main lead-out man was Mark Renshaw. Then you had Greg Henderson from Lotto. He was running with Greipel.
Greipel, of course. Yeah, great lead-out man.
Great lead-out man. But, when you look over the bunch sprint, there was not really any consistency. There was only a few guys who managed it, and it was always kind of messy. When I looked up and analyzed it, I really felt like there was a gap in the market, and I realized that if I would make myself good at this, I would have a good shot in being a good lead-out man.
It's funny that, isn't it? And I think a lot of people don't understand that, especially young pros as well, that when they come into the Peloton, you very quickly need to find a niche and excel at it and be the best at that role, whether that be a climbing, domestique support, whether that is a winner, winning races, or whether that's being a lead-out man. There's many other roles. You need to become the best at that role in order to continue on in the Peloton. It's amazing that you understood that and went, I'm going to hone my skills to become good at that. Is that the way you thought of it?
Absolutely. And I have to underline that I'm also a winner type myself. I love to win races. I love to sprint to every city sign when we are on training camp. I love to arrive first. But to be honest, I also realized, after my time with Saxo, that I could probably be a sprinter. I realized I would not be able to win the biggest Tour de France stages, but I could probably sign with a smaller team and win stages in smaller races. But that was not satisfying for me. I wanted to be a part of winning stages in Tour de France, classics, big races. And then I knew that, okay, I have to team up with somebody who can. For me, it was much bigger motivation to be a part of winning the biggest races than winning a handful of smaller races myself.
Here he is, Rendog. What about that question? Why can't you just keep pedaling? You're only 50 metres from the line in a really good lead out. Well, hang on, I might just go for myself. Tell us about that mentality.
There's so many things going on in the final of a race, whether it's Tour de France or Giro, any of these big races, and there's a game plan, and then there's a team leader, and then everybody knows their role in the team. I was always the lead-out man, so my finish line was always 300 to go, for example. Maybe set it at 200, a little bit closer to the line. But all in all, I had to get to that 300 metre mark. A lot goes into the stage. I'm not just a protected rider like the sprinter. So that's my role to keep him out of the wind all the time. So a lot of the time, like you would know, you're buffering the wind inside the final 10 kilometres. You're making decisions. You're trying to make really quick choices, whether you go left, right, whose wheel you want, plus you're guiding the team in front. So when you get deep into the final and you decide to launch your final sprint or your lead out at 500, 600, 700 to go, by the time you get to the 200 metre mark, you are absolutely spent. And if you have done your job right, you'll get to within 150 and you can see the finish line, you can taste it, you can grab it. But then in 3-4 seconds is 15 guys past you. And that just shows you've done the job right, but it is sometimes hard to swallow that you're so close and you just missed the victory.
This is Brett Lancaster.
Yeah, there was a number of occasions where he'd run second, so definitely if you didn't have a sprinter. But, most of the time, the really big races, well, sometimes you're still up there, but you'd finish at 150 or 200 to go and you'd just look for the safest way back through a raging peloton of sprinters just to stay upright, actually, and get out of the way.
Koen de Kort.
Yeah, I've really always just gone 100% for the other, so I've always just timed my lead out, so I would last until 200 meters to go or 250, whatever the plan was, and I never really had the plan to try to sprint until the line to see if I could get my own result. So, having said that, I don't think I had the capabilities to win the races myself. I think I could do high power for a long time, but I didn't have that real acceleration to win sprints that you really need. Now, it's to me, every time I did a lead out, it still almost scared me how fast they come past. I feel like I'm going fast, and that when they start kicking, it's something different. They really still accelerate.
This is fast Freddie Rodriguez.
Number one thing cycling is about is aerodynamics. I mean, if you can understand it, it's a little bit of the science of, and just the physics of it. It's like you want to propel something as fast as you can. So ideally, if you can propel it with a couple fast things, it's going to propel a lot faster. So you need that. You also need, a good Peloton. I tended to race better as a Peloton quality was better because we were at higher speeds. Lower speeds were not good for me. So, so it depended really like that. Robbie definitely was one of the guys I let out the most, loved lower, he didn't mind lower speeds because he had a good punch. So everybody's different. So, for me, it was really honing in, dropping at the right time it was really about understanding the space in the race you're at, where to be, when not to be, and then come, so to have somebody that can, that can anticipate those moments, because you can't even talk in the middle of a race. It's so loud. There's so much noise going on. You're just doing. So you need somebody that could almost intuitively know what you need at the moment and understand the qualities of the rider you're leading out to place him in the right place at the right time so that he can maximize his potential. For Robbie, it was for somebody like Robbie, it was 200 meters. Somebody like Zanini I could drop him off at 400 meters. He might win. So it really depended on the rider.
Run us through, and I won one of the best, if not the best, lead-out train there was in the history of lead-out trains was the HTC lead-out train for Mark Cavendish. You being the integral last man, run me through the positions, the last man going forward, I guess, right to what everyone's role is and why they're important leading back to you.
Yeah, when we look at HTC, you're right. At that point in time, we were one of the best teams, one of the best lead-outs. We had a really red-hot team, but we had 3 teams within the team. We had Greipel there. We had, at one stage, we had Matt Goss. We had Mark Cavendish. So we had Greg Henderson. We had Bolson Hagen. So we had depth across the whole field over that 3 years at HTC. Looking at the roles, you always have the sprinter, which was either Greipel or Cavendish. You'd have your last lead-out man, which in most of the time was myself with Mark Cavendish. You have your second last lead-out man. There was times where I had Matt Goss just leading out me. So he went to the world titles that year and finished second to Cavendish, but during the tour, he was second last lead-out man in front of me. So the depth we had was huge.
Just before you move on to the next rider, let's explain a little bit the difference in physiology, or not necessarily physiology, but just as clearly, because Gossi could be a sprinter himself, but what different sort of sprint was he doing to sort of set you up? You had to do a faster sprint perhaps after him, a shorter sprint. What was Gossi's role? To go in front of you, it's a different sort of position, isn't it?
It is completely different, but in the same vote, it's nearly the same because he's got to produce high watts. He just needs to produce them for a little bit longer. So the average watts, the average watts are a little bit lower, but my expectations are he could do anywhere from 30 seconds to 1 minute on the front. And he's really going to need to make sure that he puts me in the position that when I see 700 to go, 600 to go, I can go. I can't be boxed in. I can't be on the wrong side. I can't have trains coming with speed over the top and closing us in. So my expectation of the second last lead-out man is that they need to push wind, and they need to push wind from anywhere 30 seconds to a minute, even up to a minute and a half, depending if we are missing certain riders in front of him.
So they need to be able to adapt. They need to be able to have not only the physiology to adapt, but also the smarts. Of course, you're behind calling the shots, but they also need to know that not just get on the front and do a TV turn. Yes, I'm on the front of the peloton. I'm just going to explode this. Hey, mate, we've still got quite a long way to go here. Get us through these 2 roundabouts. They've got to be able to adapt, don't they?
Yeah, you have to be able to adapt. Each rider in the team needs to be able to adapt to the situation at the moment and really what's already happened in the race. The lead-out man, in my case, I made a lot of decisions on the day over the second half of the stage. So we'd have a plan in the bus. You go here, you go here. Not often, not always did it end up working that way. So having a good second last lead out man who's extremely strong still has a really good turn of speed, because if you get caught out of position, you have to do that initial big power, step out into the wind and move up. And of course, someone who's got good skills, on the same wavelength in as far as you don't need to give them clear instructions. It's just a 1 or a 2 word instruction. Once they hear that, they feel what needs to happen. They feel the movement in the bunch and where the sprinter, who's now 2 wheels back, needs to be.
What about in front of Gossi and moving forward? How important are these guys? I think these guys get underrated or missed because maybe they're not seen on TV. You were renowned, in my opinion, as the best lead-out man on the world and in the world at that point of your career. And a lot of people got to see the job you did. It was at the final and you came out and you produced this great lead-out. But to get to that position, the guys, sort of the unspoken guys, the guys who did the legwork, what's their role before to set you up?
Yeah, so back in the Tour de France, when these HTC days that we're really talking about, you're right, we've spoken about the back end of that lead out, which is mainly 3 sprinters. We go forward into that, I suppose, third last man, and some of the guys I worked with, for example, Hincapie, Bernard Eisel, Edvald Bosenhagen, Tony Martin.
Just agents.
So these guys are some of the best bike riders we've seen in the classics. We've seen attacking sprinters in their own right, and also super domestiques like Big George, for example. These guys can produce high power. They can produce it for a long time. So inside the final 10 kilometres, if I said to Bernard Eisel, who I think is probably the best ever, fourth last man, if I said to him, you need to ride 10 kilometres and you need to ride at 60 k's an hour, and every time someone comes up on our hip, you need to turn right and put them in the barrier, he will do it every day of the week because he's just that strong. He can do that high power for that, 10 minutes is not a long time, but in the Tour de France, when you're at, the 15th stage and everyone's tired, and he could produce that day in, day out, just like Edvald Bosenhagen, Tony Martin, just really high power. So we were lucky enough, we had about 3 of those in front of myself. So we're already at about 5 or 6 riders with 3 big engines. You come to your next wave of guys, which are the workhorses or the GC guys.
I love hearing that. It's just amazing to have those guys in front of you because they can adapt. Like you said, they can go long, they can go short. A guy like Bernie Eisel, he could also produce a small, quick turn if necessary. Who's telling who where to go? What are the positions in your mind that makes a lead-out train really work? And what was your position?
I was pretty much always last man.
What is the last man?
Yeah, I don't know. There's no name for it, is there? But
the last guy before the
sprinter. So, and you'll drop them off as late or as deep into the race as you possibly can. And normally like the 200 meter mark was a goal. And if you could go into the last kilometer with 3 guys, would be optimal. Normally it was only 2, and then it's changed over the years. A lot evolved or gone back and forth. Then, if you did go into the banner, you'd have 2 guys in front of me, the second last guy. You'd be like, all right, here we go. Noah's coming past now. So that's what it was. I mean, like many years ago, you have the big Seiko train and you wouldn't move from behind that. And actually, that's what makes it more extraordinary about Robbie McEwen, what he was doing in his day, just battering alone on his own. He had Freddie there at times, didn't he? And Gatesy helping him out, but he'd challenge these big trains. He was the only guy, I think, ever to do that back in that era. But now, a lot of GC teams and sprinters are in there battling on their own or just have one guy, and that's why it's a lot more messier. And also the GC guys trying to, keep their place on GC.
Were you the guy who was orchestrating the train in the final few kilometres? Were you the guy vocally speaking out, or who does that role?
I think, I did. You experienced that with me, Mitch, in Tour of Poland. When I first started sort of working with you, we had another member in the team at that time that probably didn't agree with the way we run things. But we had a plan. I don't need to name any names, Mitch. And it was just about the feel. Like I did it for that many years. You could just feel the pace of the bunch, who was there. You knew who the other strong guys were and where you need to be at certain points. Was it left or right? And, it was always, even to this day, for GC teams, you like pick a side and you stay there, you don't move. And that's your side.
Tell me about that role that you went into when you went to, Skill Shimano, our team, which, evolved into Alberson and all the other names they decided to have. Working with John Degenkolb as well, and actually becoming a bit of a captain of the lead-out train. And something that I admired from you working against you was how you were able to control and lead and, explain that role as a lead-out man, what you need to do with controlling your train and making sure everyone hits their markers and that sort of thing. It's like driving a bus, I guess. Yeah,
it really is. I think a lot of it is just preparation, making sure that whether it was with Marcel or with Marcel Kittel or John Degenkolb, I would always speak to the sprinter himself and really go through the plan, look at Google Maps, Google Street View, like really look at the markers and pick a point, once you can see the church down the road, that's when, Albert Timmer has to start doing his lead out. So we really had very specific points, and it wasn't just 5K to go. It was something you could visually see, something that you could really use. And then you were always going for plan A. We didn't really make a lot of plan Bs, but everybody kind of knew from working together so long that, if you're not in a position you have to be when plan A starts, then, you got to do what you got to do to get as close as possible to plan A again. So, sometimes it means burning riders too early, or sometimes it would even work out and you could sit back a little bit longer. But then was my role just to try to shout at everyone. And I think, it was already the time when we were teammates. Yeah, I think at one point you know each other so well that if you can hear someone scream, you're pretty sure you know what it means. You don't even need to really scream at a word. You could just go, and you probably know what it means. So whether it's go or stop, everybody kind of knows what to do.
What about the different styles of sprints? You're just speaking about lining it out as a lead-out train. You've also spoken about when you started working with Alan, it was sort of a bit messy, maybe even dropping him off. What was something that you felt you were really good at and you liked doing? And I guess you did a bit of both.
Yeah, I think for me, my strongest point was really trying to read the race and take a decision on what is best for the sprinter. And I think that's also why the sprinter then gave me so much confidence. So they really let me do it, just follow me and I will get you there. And sometimes that means indeed just dropping someone off. And the sprinter would understand that. But the nicest is obviously when you can do the lead out. When you go to 200 meters to go in the front, you got the sprinter on your wheel and he finishes the job. It's great. But if the job was like, everything is going wrong and I with one last effort, I bring the sprinter to the first 5 riders, 1K to go and have to leave him on his own. That sometimes that's also very satisfying because you took the right decision at that time. And that's what it was about for me.
How are you communicating with your sprinter, but also with the guys in front of you? Are you that guy who sort of, yells out, we're going too fast, or, you're looking under your arm, seeing if, working with Caleb Ewan, seeing if Caleb's still there, or is he yelling at you? How do you communicate? When you said you're going 60K an hour, there's 3 or 4 sprint trains on the left and right. How are you even talking to each other? This is Roger Kluge.
Not much. It's just screaming. It's so loud. Talking is not really possible, but usually it comes from the guy behind to the guy in front because, we or I can't look back every 5 seconds if he is there. It's just too danger. I need to, focus and concentrate and see what's happening in front of me and which direction I go. Even if he said left, if we see, there are already 5 teams, and better we go out on the right side just to move and make a big move and pass them all and then maybe slot in from the front again. So I can't really look back that much. I can ask also, just scream his name. And if he say yes, okay, I know he's still there. And that's usually then the way, from back to forward, that the guy, he actually then from 4th position behind me, he could see and scream if a team coming and pass, which I don't see. And then he screams maybe to Jesper, the guy before. And then the guy who was there for screams to him. And then he screams to me. So it goes in this way because it's just with all the noise, wheels, wind, races, 100 other guys screaming. So by the time it should go automatically, that's then you don't have to talk that much. You just know and feel that your sprinter is there. You can trust your sprinter that he's still following. Doesn't matter which way you go, if you go take a small gap or not. Maybe you have a short look. If you have a feeling, it just gets squeezed, maybe you have a look and he's still there. But you don't look every 5 seconds. So, but this whole thing, after years, it should go automatically. But with all different scenarios, this time and timing is so important that like I said before, this perfect scenario will probably never happen. So you can talk as much as you want. Every race is different. Every finale.
Mikkel Merku.
Well, I think as a sprinter, as a lead-out man, and as a team, it's important to enter the sponge sprint without a too specific plan. Many teams think that they have to plan everything down to last detail, that this guy have to pull on to 800, this to do 500, and then this guy have to take tight corner, and then they have to go to left side. That never works, you know. I like to go into the last K as free as possible, of course, with a lot of information about who are you competing against, how is the wind, which corner is coming, which side could be better to be at. But you have to be so flexible and free in the moment, because maybe somebody is taking a bad corner and you have to dive under. Maybe you expect Peloton to go on left side, but they go on right side. So you just have to be ready to move on your instinct. And I think this is the most important, to be free in the mind and ready to move on your instinct. And then, of course, if I move on my instinct, I really need a sprinter who trusts me 100% and do not doubt on my decisions, you know. And I think this is the whole key point, and that's also where you see, like, I would always refer to Cavendish and Renshaw, because they was the best in the business for years, and you could see that Cav, he was just trusting Renshaw 100%. So he had all the freedom in the world to do what he thought was the right thing to do.
Why does a sprinter need a lead out? Why can't they just fluff around and all sprint in one big bunch?
Sometimes it works. I mean, you have these sprinters that are just really good, and they can ride through the middle of the bunch, like bump a couple of people out the way. They never hit the wind, and they're on another sprinter's wheel, and they can win. But in general, you have to be very lucky to be able to do that. So what you need a lead out for is essentially making sure you can sprint in the ideal position. So that's most important, and that's also why you want someone like really a lead-out man in front of you who goes from 500 meters to go to 200 meters to go, because you're in the ideal position. No one's going to overtake you. You're at a good speed. So that's the ideal situation. And the lead-out is just there to make sure you are in the front. You know, if you start from 15th position, I think only Marcel Kittel in his best days could do that. But otherwise, every sprinter has to start from like a second, third, fourth, fifth wheel, maybe 200 meters to go. Otherwise, it's pretty much game over.
The last man, a position you were very used to. Run me through that job and the importance of that position.
Yeah, it's for me, like I was most of the time last man or second last man. If it was like a really fast sprint, I have no problem to have a faster guy behind me, as we spoke about before. And like my acceleration wasn't great. I think I was good at a longer pull. I have high speed, but more something like 30-40 seconds instead of the real short sprints. So sometimes if that was needed, then it was good for me to have one rider behind me. But for me, the last man, he really needs to always think about the sprinter behind, because he's the one who can still correct the situation. You know, if you are already two in front, then you can't hear the sprinter. If the sprinter loses the wheel, you can't hear it. You really have to rely on the last man. So sometimes it means that the last man needs to let the train go for a while and hope to get back in there. And maybe that's even the job that they can do. Bring the sprinter back onto the train and go through the wind, and that's the end of the day for them. So yeah, it's really just being the pilot of the sprinter. That's really just what it is. And if you are fast and you can really launch and put the sprinter up to speed already into 200 meters to go, that's even better. But I think the most important is always knowing where the sprinter is. Like, where is he behind you? Is he still there? Always communicate. You know, also from our time in Skills Shimano, we would just be yelling at each other the whole time. Like from 5K to go, it's like, Mitch, you there? Like, Albert, you there? Roy, you there? Like everybody, all the time. It was just constantly talking, because you can't be sitting down backwards on your bike all the time. It would be super dangerous. So it's all about communication, I think.
What about between the other lead-out men? You know, I guess some people listening out there are wondering, why wouldn't you want to win the race yourself? But something I struggle to explain to people is that in your own realm of job within the peloton, there's respect between the other guys and other teams doing that job. And if you do your job perfectly, and maybe a sprinter doesn't really even win, that there'll be a mutual respect from another lead-out man or someone aspiring to do that job. That'll be just, it might even just be a little nod or just a little, between you that you've done a great job. It's almost as good as a win. I wouldn't say it's as good as a win, but it's really satisfying, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, if you nail a leader and you know you've nailed it and your sprinter gets beaten, you still feel happy. It's always better when they do win. Depends who you were leading out at the time. I was lucky enough to work with Petacchi, and there were some lead-outs where we were running low on men and I'd drop him at 300 metres to go and the guy would still put his hands up and win. And what the hell is that? And he'd come back and you think, oh, I've stuffed. And he'd win, but I'd think myself, I've stuffed that one up. And I'm like, he's going to be pissed. I'm back and go, great lead-out. So he was a unique sprinter to work for, but he was, one of the best of his time. And obviously we know that when he was faster in terms of that, he'd won, 18 stages in one year of Grand Tours. And I rode a couple of Giros with him and he won 6-7 stages that year leading him out. Yeah, and then you talk about Renshaw for work. We had to be a bit more specific. We were racing against the train of HTC then, of Cavendish, was in probably the form of his life, winning multiple stages. So we had to get a little more technical, and we even played some mind games, psychological style. We had to, to think up other tricks because they were very, very strong train to come up against.
This is something that happened to me and it's hard to get your head around it. You've been waiting all day. You prepared for it. The lead-outs happened. All of a sudden, you come to your point to do your pull at 700 metres to go. You look under your arm and actually your sprinter's let one guy in front of you or two and you can see your sprinter still there. It's time for you to move out of the way humbly. It tricks with your head because you're like, no, I'm prepared to do my turn now. This is what I've been here to do. Some of the best things I learned from you was that move right there. To be humble enough to go, the best thing I can do is move out of the way. How do you do that, and why would you do that?
There's so many split decisions, and you're right. The hairs on my back and my neck are starting to stand up because I'm reliving those moments when you're inside a lead out. You come into the final. You're right. You look under your shoulder. Cav's 2 wheels behind. Okay, are we close enough to the finish line that if I put the guy in my wheel in the wind, is he going to commit? So if we're within 300, say Marcel Kittel. I don't know, Greipel. Someone's in my wheel, Cav's in their wheel. If we're within 300, I'm going to do one last pull. I'm going to get him to 200, and then it's up to Greipel. He has to commit. 200 to go. Like it or loathe it, he's going to have to go. And that's going to just put Cavendish in the perfect position. 200 metres to go, he'll breeze past Greipel. If, for example, we're a little bit further back, we're 600 to go, I'm on the front, we've got one sprinter, then Cavendish, well, then it's a different situation. You have to either completely just pull as hard as you can, as long as you can, to get them inside that 250, 200. The other situation is you'll look back, Cav's 5 wheels behind, and then we're 700 out. Maybe the best chance is, you're there with your sprinter. I just need to get the hell out, and I need to put all the shift, all the focus onto you, because if I go full all the way to 200, Cav's in 7th wheel, it's going to be really difficult. He's going to have to weave his way through. He's going to have to face traffic. Is he going to go to the right side? Do we switch left and right? There's so many decisions, and you have to do it in half a second, like very well in a stage final. And I guess it comes down to knowing all the riders, knowing the stage finish, and also knowing the sprinter. Is Mark Cavendish happy to sprint within the wheels? Early on in his career, he loved it. He thrived on ducking through the wheels. But as we got more and more into the career, the lead-outs got more defined. There was bigger teams doing more riders committing, and it changed slightly. And now we've seen it come completely back to a messy sprint.
That's so interesting because all those split decisions you're making, that's because of your relationship with the sprinter. And we're talking about Mark Cavendish now, someone you worked with for a long time and had a lot of success with. Tell me about that relationship. That relationship on bike is very important. What about off bike? Does that actually help the relationship on bike? Actually understanding who this guy is as a person, hanging out, drinking beers maybe, or, even just having a laugh with them. How does that work with the mentality on the bike? Because from my experience as a lead-out man, it's a bit of a psychological role. You've got to pump your sprinter up sometimes.
You do, and things certainly evolved in my career with Mark Cavendish. He's the biggest sprinter I worked with. We had the most success. But early on, we'd room together, especially right in the start. We started to do, we're doing 50 to 60, 70 races together a year. And then we slightly moved apart, and I was rooming with different guys. He was rooming mostly with Bernard Eisel, who he's also really good friends with. And I think it came down to we were totally different characters, but put us in the end of a bike race and we were the same animal. But throughout the stage, I was much more calm, hence the reason I moved into that role in the start to do the lead out. And then I moved not so much the team ride captain, the road captain, because I didn't have the legs to do that. I couldn't ride in the front all day. I'd have to ride further back and save myself. So Isa was much better at being a road captain, but the preview of the stage in the morning in the team meeting, what it's like in a bus, everyone's talking over the top of each other, everyone's got an opinion. What I found was that once I got the team to just shut up for a moment, just sit there, listen, this is how we need to do it. We need to stay calm. And that was that's what I brought to the team. So more of a calm decision-making process rather than, getting so amped before the stage. And Cav, we see what he's like. We see in the media how they portray him and how he portrays himself. He's, shoot from the hip and just go, bang, 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 where I try to make more calculated decisions. And I think my calmness brought, I don't know how to explain it, another level to Cav, where maybe it just gave him a little bit calmness and then he could focus on his role.
How strong is the bond between the lead-out man and the sprinter? And now you've worked with a whole bunch of very, very good sprinters, but very, very different sprinters. You worked with Elia Viviani, Sam Bennett, Mark Cavendish, Fabio Jakobsen, Tim Muller. You also Christoph in the early days. There's many guys I'm probably not mentioning. They're the ones that I can remember off the top of my head. But very different sprinters, and I can imagine very different mentalities. How are you able to create that so they have the trust in you? How important is that to build up that relationship?
Well, that's for me the key point, to get a good connection with your sprinter. I had the fortune that after a few years of delivering sprinters to victory, then when you get a new sprinter, they automatically trust you from the start because they've seen what you have done in the past with the other ones. I would say that my job becomes easier and easier. You have to prove again yourself, but of course, a consistency, showing that you can be there, that also gives the trust from the sprinter, But yeah, I really enjoy to get a good connection, also private connection with the sprinter, so that when we are in the heat of the moment, we stick together and we either win or lose together. That's very important, because a lead-out man cannot be a lead-out man if the sprinter doesn't trust him. And you see this several times. A guy who maybe tried to become a lead-out man, maybe a team try to make this rider a lead-out man, but if the sprinter doesn't stay with him, he have no chance to do a lead-out. So that's the first point, that the sprinter have to stay and trust the lead-out man, and the sprinter need to be willing to risk losing with his lead-out man if you want to win as well.
It can be really strong. I think it's very important for a sprinter to really have someone they trust, because that's what it all comes down to. So if they have a lead-out man they know is going to get them in the right position, it's so valuable for a sprinter. So very often a sprinter will want to take his lead-out man with him, or hope that that this new team where they will go to, they can sign another lead-out man that they've worked with in the past or they've seen in races, and they will trust to do the right job. And I think it's something that a sprinter really needs. If a sprinter would go to another team and have no lead-out man, I think that would be a recipe for disaster. Because it takes a while to to really know how to work with someone, and it doesn't mean that you can't teach someone how to do it, but it takes some time. So I think it's better even to have a lead-out man already there and teach 2 or 3 other guys to really go into the train, and then eventually, like what I had with John Degenkolb, I was always with John on the team, went together with him to track, but eventually our sort of paths separated, and he went another direction. And I started working with other riders on track, and that worked because he found someone else there, and that works really well. But I'm also really happy that he took me to track, of course.
What about off the bike? Is it safe to assume that the lead-out man and the sprinter are friends?
I think so. Yeah, I don't think you can get the sort of trust that you need between the lead-out man and the sprinter if you can't be friendly off the bike as well. Because, I think a lot of the sprinters understand what a lead-out man does, and the sacrifices they make, because they train just as hard. They see their family also never.
Yeah.
So I think they understand that they do that all just for that sprinter. So I think just that respect for the lead-out man plus the trust they have, I think it's safe to assume that they are always at least friendly together.
What was it like? Yeah, like you said, working with a guy like Robbie, and both of you guys were, successful sprinters, yourself being a sprinter and then being slotted into the role as a lead-out man. Generally think sprinters don't make the best lead-out men, weirdly, because they've been at the end. They sort of want to be winning races. They don't want to be leading someone else out. So how did that dynamic work when you dropped into a lead-out man? It sounds like it had two masterminds creating this great scenario. Is that sort of how it was?
Well, it also helped that Robbie was that much more successful at winning. So, I saw that in him, and my goal was to win. So if I felt that if I can give him that extra edge, we're both winning. So that was my mentality. I was always very cooperative in my solutions to winning races. You have to be willing to lose a race to win the race. So that was always my mentality. So I never raced for second. I always raced to find a solution. Even if I'd rather come last than, so to me, knowing Robbie's qualities or whoever I was leading out or whoever was going to lead me out, that I was going to be the best person for the job to give us the best result. So that was always my mentality. It wasn't, I'm the fastest or, I know that some athletes were more like that, but I always felt, what's the best solution to win today?
How far does that extend? You get that good relationship, you get that good working relationship. You and Robbie, for example, you had a click. He understood when you were going to sprint. He understood when you were going to duck under a corner, what he'd be able to tell from your legs, from your body action, when you're about to jump, when you're about to lose your speed so he could come off you. All that stuff takes time. How far does it extend then when he's moving teams? Does he go, you know what, it's so successful with Freddie, I need to bring him with me? Was that the way it works with some guys, do you think? How far can it go?
Yeah, no, sometimes, yeah, that definitely makes a difference, because it's hard to, I feel like when I left Lotto, there would definitely, it was a little harder for Robbie, I could be wrong, but I know I know that I brought something different to him at the time, same thing, with the sprinters, like when I was leading Tom's deals, Tom was an amazing sprinter himself, and he relied differently on different people, and hopefully when I let him out, he got something different. And that I always looked at racing as a game. It's like strategizing and finding solutions. So I always looked at bike racing more than just who's the strongest, but who is in the right place at the right time with who not. There's so many different situations that make the perfect situation for you. Not that there's one perfect in the other, but a better one for you. And, even when I remember beating Petacchi, I knew I could beat Petacchi the year before. I just had to put myself in the right situation. And I knew his lead out guy, I think it was Bello at the time, he actually decelerated the lead out, and it actually caused problems for everybody else, because even though it was a great lead out, it made the rest of us sprinters have to almost hit the brakes a little bit, because it wasn't as fast as we thought it was going to be. And then put Petacchi in a perfect situation just to, go his 300 meters or his 250 that he used to do. So I knew I had to anticipate him. I knew that I needed to anticipate him. And so if I had to find a solution for a lead out to beat them, those are the kind of things I started looking for. It's like, what are those little tidbits in the race that give me a better solution, And so I would use it with Robbie. It's like, we need to go earlier. I remember one stage in Tour Swiss where it was a chicane. It was like a right turn, left turn really quick. And it was in a long straightaway. And we're thinking, hey, let's try that. It was actually Robbie. I think it was Robbie's idea. Let's try to go early. He goes, hey, lead it out. And, as soon as you get to that first corner, let me on, I'm going to go on your inside and you're just going to shut it down. And it was using kind of a little bit of crit style, strategies. And so basically it was a thing. Zabel had a perfect lead out and he's coming into the corner with this guy, and we just went early, and they're looking at us like, where are they going? And so we take the corner. I'm coming, Robbie, is on my wheel, and people are thinking, okay, two guys are going to go this far. And as soon as we go through the car, Robbie's an amazing bike handler. He just, he took that apex really tight. and then I just shut it down. And then basically, then I go wide. And by the time we come out the last corner, he's already 50 meters, 100 meters, he's gone. And so, those kind of solutions, how the creative solutions that we were trying to figure out how to win races that kind of helped us, especially when you got it, the way we raced it compared to some of the Petacchi teams, we were just a perfect lead out. We had to find solutions to get get him to the place where he could do his best at the right moment. If we got there too early, it was a waste of energy. If we got there too late, we were out of the race. So that's kind of like the art of sprinting. That's really hard to give it an answer how you do that. How do you teach that? You just got to do it over and over again until you find those solutions. Oh, mate, I had some very interesting experiences because I'm going to be very hot-headed.
Yeah.
I was in Panari actually for 4 years. We had at that time a few different sprinters in the team, Padre de Grillo and Graham Brown. And Ruben Bongiorno, an Argentinian little fellow who won quite a few races. And there was a certain instant when we went back to a hotel room and Graham wasn't happy that the other one won and hotel room was a bit trashed. But yeah, quite heated, some of these guys. Yeah, and like I said, different experience with these different guys. Petacchi was a super calm guy for a sprinter, introverted for sure, different character. But, you saw how neat he was. I shared a room with him once and everything was just perfect, folded and cleaned and he studied the map. He knew what he was doing, he knew what you needed to do for him.
Very important for a lead out man is to have his ego in check. And it sounds like for me, that is something that you do have. It's not important about how you do what job you have, as long as the sprinter's winning, whether you're second last man, whether you're positioning them in the right position for the sprint. If you don't get seen on TV, for you, that's not important. It's important that the team wins. How important, and have you seen the differences of guys who don't quite understand that? It's still all about them. They struggle with the ego about recognized for their job opposed to doing their job. And, you would know the type. Guys who are doing the turns too fast at the right and wrong moment, or how important it is to understand what your role is and having your ego in check.
Yeah, I think you hit the right point there, that a lead-out man, even other domestic riders, the ego have to be on check, It have to be a way, because I cannot enter a sprint as a lead-out man with my own idea of how can I show myself here to the world, as a lead-out man. I have a very good example. 2020 Tour de France, we entering the Champs-Élysées. I'm riding for Bennett, he's in green. I'm arriving first on the last finishing straight. I always already picture in my mind, I gonna do like my idol, Mark Renshaw. I gonna lead out now Sam to victory, and I gonna raise my hands just behind him on second place, like they did probably 10 years before, which was like the best picture I ever seen of a lead out man and a sprinter. So I come around first in the last corner. I'm just flying. I have super legs. I'm ready just to, smash it towards the finish line. But coming around the corner, I check behind me and I see that Jesper Stuyven and Mads Pedersen from Trek got in between me and Sam. So I knew that if I would just kick it, I would probably lead out Mads Pedersen to the last stage win. So ironically, what I have to do in that situation is just pull off. But as an athlete, you just want to hit it towards the finish line and win together with Sam. The best I could do in that situation was to peel off and make Jesper Stuyven start his sprint, which he did, which exposed Mads a bit early, and then Sam won from the third wheel.
This is the pinnacle stuff that no one will understand, and it takes so much as a lead-out man to do that. Exactly, you said you've got 21 days built up, plus the Mark Renshaw image in your mind, plus that stage, everything built up, the emotion, the adrenaline, and to have the calmness to do what was right, all for your sprinter. That is the pinnacle right there. I'm so happy you told that story. That's awesome. This is Mark Renshaw,
came a point where you went back and sprinted for yourself again after being a lead-out man, and it's not as easy as that. And I only experienced that, a couple of times in my career. Often the sprinter would move out of the way, or we got a puncher in the last moment, and suddenly we get that chance at going for the line. It's not as easy as just flipping that switch. There's obviously a winning mentality that goes on top of the job. And I'm not taking anything away from a lead-out role, but it's a different mentality. Tell me about that transition back and how hard it was. Was it a psychological transition or was it a physical transition back to trying to win?
Yeah, it was both. It was mental and physical. I think when I kind of went my own way and I went to Rabobank or Belkin or Blanco, at that period in time, physically I was probably the best I ever was in my whole career. Mentally, I started working with some psychologists. I started to work down different paths, trying to find a way to perform better. Look, it didn't come naturally. I don't know, because I did so many years of leading out. I was either, hanging on the wheel, waiting, and then it was over before I got to do a sprint. So many times I just didn't get to sprint. And then there were situations where I'd go too early. I just couldn't find that sweet spot, and it just didn't come straight back to me naturally. Like, an under 19 rider on the track where you just felt when you had to go. You knew you had to go right at that moment, and I'd lost that. But physically, I was the strongest and the best over my whole 16-year career was when I was at those teams.
All right, run us through the different styles of lead-outs. Tell me through the different styles, in your opinion, of lead-outs.
Well, we'll go from best to worst. I think that's probably a good way of putting it. A best case scenario is second last lead-out man. He's dropped you off 500 to go. Absolutely perfect. Champs-Élysées with Cavendish. I've got George Hincapie. The plan was he goes under the 1 kilometre to go banner. He steps off the wheel of Garmin to the left. He goes at 1K. He gets me inside 500, inside the final turn. I rail the turn. Bang, I go to the finish line. Best case scenario, 1-2. Doesn't get better than that. Next scenario is you're a little bit behind and your second last lead out man, he hasn't got you to the front. Now you've got to try and weave your way through, or you're on the hip of Skill Shimano, or you're on the hip of Lotto Soudal with Greipel. So you have to go. And then you're going to go at about 600 because you're going to use those teams. You're going to get into not so much a slipstream, but you're riding off the hip. And you're going to try and anticipate their lead out man going. You want to jump before because you want to put your lead out man into the front position first. Then he basically is going to have, I always said it, fresh air on the nose. There's nothing in front of him.
A tough job, that one, because you're sitting on the side the whole time before you even really get to launch him.
You're pushing wind. You're already pushing 500, 550, 600 watts. And then you have to go to 900, 950, 1,000, and you have to sustain that for as long as possible. But meanwhile, you've been sitting off the hip. So you are still getting, if it's crosswind or if you're in the gutter or where you're positioned, you can ride a little bit off them. That's a nice lead out. Getting a little bit worse is the team have had to chase all day. You've used up all your lieutenants. They're all gone, and it's just you and the sprinter left. Really, then you're in freestyle mode. So it may come to a case where you're just trying to keep him in a good position in the final 10Ks, and you're just surfing off trains. You're just really trying to use other teams as much as possible. And this is like worst case. You're going to move up in the wind. You're going to get alongside the sprinter. You're going to pull in front of his lead-out man. So then, for example, your sprinter, Cavendish, he's just going to drift back and he's just going to bash straight in on Greipel's wheel. Because once you get your handlebars in front, you're in prime position. All you got to do is you drift back, turn right, hip, shoulder, and they just can't fight you because your hips are their handlebars. Luckily, your fingers crossed, there might be a corner. And then you can just dive up the inside, drift wide, take the wheel. We're going from good, okay, to bad situations. And I think the worst situation can be is that, you can't even be inside the final K. And then it's a situation you've had to do so much work leading up. Everything's gone wrong. And now you're just completely dumping all the responsibility in your sprinter's basket, and you pat him on the back and you say, good luck. And that's, there's situations where that happened, and still, for example, Cavendish still won, and that shows you that they are the absolute best sprinter because they've won off a pure lead out, they've won in the wheel of a good sprinter, and now they've won on their own. So I think that shows the mentality and, the grit of a top sprinter. And we saw that from so many guys I worked with.
This is Koen de Kort.
How has the lead out changed in your time in the Peloton?
When we started, with Skill Shimano, I think that's when we really started a lead out train that kind of rivaled the T-Mobile times, so to say, which was kind of where we came into. Then it was really just a couple of teams, there was like one or two teams that really wanted to do a lead out and really try to help a sprinter go for it, and the rest just kind of had one or two guys there just to help out for the sprint, and all the other riders on the team were focused on something else. But I feel like almost every sprinter in their own team have their own lead out, so now you see very often 8-9 lead out trains battling it out, and I think it's become harder. It's become more technical. It's been tactically more difficult to be in the right spot. Plus, the speed is just higher. So also it's become more difficult to be in the front for that reason.
Roger Kluge.
It's definitely a bigger challenge, I would say, here, because there's just more lead-out trains. Back then, can you imagine that there was only one or two teams battling for the front and lead-out, and all the other sprinters, maybe they had the lead-out, maybe not. Maybe they were just sitting on the wheel of the other sprinters, and then the sprinters themselves were boxing each other, fighting each other to be on the sprinters' wheel who had the lead-out train. But now everybody have his own team, and of course they trust their own teammates more than being behind another sprinter who everybody wants to be. And then nowadays we have then 10 teams, 60, 8 teams sometimes next to each other, and just waiting for the right moment, not going full gas, but maybe at 5k to go is just the road is blocked from 8 teams, maybe 2 of them even GC teams that just want to ride in front to bring your GC guy safe to the last 3k. And then suddenly, it starts and they all go all out full, because then it's just about being in front and being not behind, blocked, and being in a crash maybe.
I don't think the job of winning's changed. I started in French teams at France de Jour, Credit Agricole, and one of my directors, Serge Bouchery, he said, you've just got to débrancher la tête, you got to unplug the head. And the translation is like, just unplug it, because you just got to do what you got to do. And that's sprinting. Sometimes you just have to, débrancher la tête. You have to try and go through that gap. Maybe that's why I wasn't a sprinter that won, because I had to make those calculated risks, and I really enjoy coming back to my family and, to the kids. It's always a big circle. I think it's always just rotating. You have times and periods and races where you have really strong lead-out trains. One team will invest heavily in 2 or 3 guys. They have the best sprinter, so they try to make a nice train, and then it'll slightly change to a sprinter who's up and coming, and they all of a sudden can win on their own. And then teams start to see, why should we invest in a train when, you've got him, he can win on his own. So I think it's always rotating. The level of sprinting, I think, it's got higher, and I think that's down to a physiological, the performance of riders. They now have to climb, they now have to push more power, they have to be lighter. So I think we're slightly gone away from pure sprinters, because there's just never really a pure sprint stage this day and age, and especially in the Tour, it's just so hard.
Michael Morkov.
Well, I don't think it changed so much. I think it's still come down to the basics, bringing a sprinter in position from where he can win. It's pretty simple. I try to analyze the sprints. I try to prepare myself as good as possible, but I also really try not to make it too complicated. I also try not to make it too complicated for my sprinter. Obviously, it's very interesting. It has been very interesting for me also to work with so many different sprinters, because, of course, they all have different personalities. They have different needs. Some such a big ego that I don't need to tell them how good they are. Some have a less big ego that you really have to tell them how good they are and how much I believe they can win, So I also really enjoy maybe coaching is the wrong word, but like the supportive mental side of it, And I have to say with some sprinters, I don't need to support them so much mentally, but with some, I could really push them a long way by supporting them mentally, like into the race, like days before the race, in the race. I also like that side of it. For me, it's not only about the last K or the last 500, but it's like the whole build up, days before racing, maybe weeks before racing, in the race, like setting up your sprinter from already far, You have to keep in mind that a sprinter, a top sprinter, he has huge amount of pressure on his shoulder, probably have a big salary, everybody expecting them to win. So when they're on the race, they are really under pressure. And then as a supportive rider, like a domestic or a lead-out man, you just need so little to make them feel comfortable, You just need to say, mate, I'm going to help you today. Just stick with me. I'm going to make sure you're there for the sprint. Sometimes you can even see the shoulders just falling down, because they feel that they're all alone with all those pressure, So as a lead-out man, you just need to, few simple words, like times you just need to be confident, say, mate, I'm sure you're the fastest in this peloton. We're going to arrive in a sprint and you're going to win it, I also have a very, of course, turned out to be such a nice situation, but stage 13 in the Tour de France 21. Cavendish is on 33 stage victories at that moment. He have the chance to tie the record of Eddy Merckx. It's super hard day, southern France, super warm. We are just fighting through that stage. There's a huge crash. Gilbert is attacking on a climb. It's just a mess. Big groups is created. We all come together. It's you have headache. It's just a tough day. Already coming in second week of the tour. Okay, we're coming into the bunch sprint. We already won 3 stages with Mark. 10Ks to go. He says, me, mate, I can't do it today. I'm done. I'm roasted. I say to him, mate, you are the fastest here. You just stick to my wheel, and I promise you, I bring you to 100 meters from the line. And he looked at me and he didn't reply, but he agreed. So he just stuck on my wheel. That's what we did. That's where he made his 34 victory.
Did you feel pressure on your shoulders? Like, oh, I got to get into 100 meters to go now. I put it out there.
Well, I did, but I also knew that he's the guy who could finish the job. He's the smartest sprinter out there. And I was also in the form of my life, having confidence of already winning like 3 stages. We had a super strong team in front of me as well. So I had the feeling that we just had to give it a go, And I had that also on several other occasions, like sprinter almost losing it, almost throwing the towel in the ring, like let's say 10Ks before the finish. And then you just need that little push, I said, mate, just stick to my wheel. I'm going to bring you all the way to the finish line today, just take my wheel.
Amazing. It's just amazing. And I can even feel the confidence myself, and your voice is very calming. And I can imagine that's the way you say it in the heat of the moment. Just stick to my wheel. I love that. This is Bert.
I think it's different now based on the point system of the UCI being so critical to get that World Tour license, and it's changed so you see less designated trains because you don't get the points to have a sprinter. So it definitely has changed from that time where it wasn't as essential back, when I first started professionally in 2003, that it was more a sponsor would like to have that big name sprinter. I do vaguely remember my first ever Torino Adriatic. I was with Panari at the time. I didn't know anyone. I was a bit of a loner in the bunch. I found it quite boring and a bit like, do I really want to do this? And they let the break go. Cipollini was racing that year and let the break go to 18 minutes, I think. Some stuff you just don't see anymore. And we were riding slow for maybe 50 kilometres. And I thought, this road's like shit. Anyway, but when they did start, your Fabio Sakis and Lomba, all these guys, when they started, you didn't move. And that's the position you're in for the next 150K. And they pull it back until the sprint, Holy shit, what the hell is this? Yeah, and that's all changed now. The teams won't let anything go more than 2 minutes sometimes. They get nervous.
What was the bit that you didn't like, or the bit that you struggled with in that role?
I wouldn't say I struggle with it, but I would say sometimes we of course we didn't get the credit we deserved, so it wasn't you're not winning a race. Sometimes I've gone seconds, thirds. I've been on the podium at Tour de France leading out. So it's like it's a big result, but I was leading out. Could I have won? There was actually a stage where Robbie was about to give me the win, and it just happened to be the steward got in the way, and so you have to reaccelerate, and I got third. But that's probably the frustration, is not getting that, it's like, I love soccer, football, the assist is huge. It's like, De Bruyne, it's like that guy makes so many assists. Like he's the king of the game. It's like he's a playmaker. So I think if we can evolve the sport to understand the playmakers, and I think that could be, it's a game, and it's like I break down the sport. It's like, because I love football. It's like, we got defenders, we got midfielders, and we got forwards. And we're basically working as a team, so we can all one of us gets to cross the line. One of us gets to score the goal at the end of the race once. So it's like, how do we do it as a team? It's the final guy, the playmaker. That's hopefully the guy is going to put your team in the best position, so your strongest card can come out.
No, real fighting and going in gaps, fighting position, hold position. So I'm, like I said earlier, I'm more prefer the safe way. And if I don't go through the gap, okay, then I need to go around and be strong enough to go in the wind back to the front or stay just there. But Caleb pushed me a lot, or a few times. You need to go. You're so big and you have the power and the weight, whatever. If you push the other guy, they will go away. But I haven't the feeling that it's so easy just because you're big and heavy. If they have the right angle, I think even Caleb could push me away. Or if he goes underneath my handlebar and do the right lift moment, whatever, then I go left and he goes right. But yeah, that doesn't really help the sprinter if we're always losing position and then we need to go up on the side, and that costs him energy. So if he doesn't invest more energy to stay there, then maybe he does it himself. He's still protecting the bunch. If he can follow through the bunch, then I try to follow him, or I go around and pick him up again if he's still there in front, and it's just about me. So, but that's then really the working between each other. You need to know after years, or you will figure out what way is the best for everybody.
Mate, I love it all. I really do. I love it. I when I'm now on training camp, or even when you just do, let's say, the last sprint in some race, you like, there's 2 months for the next one sprint, I absolutely love it. Even in the big tours, you have several mountain days, but that's just a different task, Then you switch on like survival mode. You prepare your sprinter for some tough sprint stage. You try to manage you and your team through these stages, losing time, saving energy, staying within the time limit is a different task, but it's still a part of the same journey,
I don't know if there's one exact thing that I struggled with. One really difficult point or part is when the sprinter outclimbs you. And, I had horrible times, and it was always at that preparation race for the Tour de France. It was always in Romandy or Swiss or California. And, Cav would turn up and, he's climbing second group. I'm one of the first guys getting dropped, and he's all of a sudden climbing second group. And it's just, you're expected to always be with a sprinter. Some days he can just, he's riding with Valverde. Like, I just can't suddenly get better. That's my level, and that's the watts I push. I push 380. I can push it all day, but I can't ride 420. And then one day Cav turns up, rides 420. He's in second group with, best climbers. And that really frustrated me because, the second team car doesn't stay with me. It stays with Cav. So I'm behind the second team car. I don't have my spare bike. I don't have my drink bottles from my team. I don't have the mix that I like, the bars that I like, because they're following Cav, who's 10 minutes up the road.
You feel useless too. You're like, I'm supposed to be here leading him out. I can't even do my job.
It's heartbreaking.
I'd be lying if you didn't say you ever felt that you've had the feeling you were in danger or going to crash. And then definitely towards the end of your career, and especially mine, you switched it up and did a bit more of a workman role, because it's hairy out there. It's really, really crazy. And you go into those days knowing today could be that day you're on the deck, and it does happen. I mean, it's more so for the sprinter. But if when you know how to lead out, you get a bit older, you know when to move out of the way at the right time. And then you'll even see lead-out men like myself will go, okay, I'm done here. I'm going to take it back to third last and teach someone else how to do it.
Tell me about the best part of the job, the favorite part, and the bit that you really liked.
Just, when it's like I could, that I think I was 2005 stage with Robbie when he won in Montpellier, I think it was, maybe stage 13. And just the amount of work we put into it, looking like it wasn't going to happen. Those moments where, and then you win, or Robbie wins. It was as big as a win for me as it was for him, because, I felt, I felt good about my job. I felt good at what I did. And, and the fact that I got third on that day, just showed how well the lead out went. So it's just like you're on a high. And that's like, so for a lead out guy, at least for me personally, I took a lot of joy in it. And I took a lot of joy in being able to unleash my potential at the right moment, to give them the perfect lead out. That's, when you do the perfect lead out and your sprinter doesn't have to do anything. And I've had that on the other side, I remember at Tour Suisse, my first stage when at Tour Suisse was that Zanini led me out. I swear to God, I coasted to the finish line. It felt like I did, it's like, it's just like that feeling of that perfect lead out. You're like, wow, that was amazing. So, I've had it before, and I had it when I was on Saturn with Frank McCormick and guys like that led me out back then. And, those lead out moments, when you get somebody to do an amazing lead out is pretty cool.
I think it's just going into the last few kilometers where you're not really thinking anymore. It's just reacting. And even very often we watch back the images, you see the helicopter images, you can see yourself, and I couldn't even remember half the things that happened or I did. It was just so racing on instinct and reacting. And I think that was my favorite thing. You're really living in the moment. And I think that's what was best about that. Yeah, we had a few amazing lead outs where just everything worked. I think we had 1 year with Marcel Kittel where, in the Tour de France, we almost won every sprint. And it wasn't because Marcel was just by far the strongest and it didn't matter what we did for him, but the whole team clicked. It really worked really well. And I especially remember the stage going into London. I can't really remember exactly which year that Tour de France was, but it was raining a little bit, and we hit the front actually maybe a little bit too far out. But I felt like every single rider on that team, they just went above and beyond, just stronger than what we expected from each other. And in the end, also was a great last man job by Tom Velers and launched Marcel Kittel, and he won. I think that was I think from all the sprints I've done, all the times we made a plan, like that real plan A that just worked out perfectly, maybe happened 2 or 3 times, but that was one of them. And in the biggest race in the world, finishing in London, one of the biggest cities in the world as well. I think that was one to remember forever.
Of course, winning in the end, and then if you see it, so if you still come far enough on a long straight and you've done your job, and then you see always the guys like, come, put your arms up, and if you see the arms of your teammate, then it's just the release and the joy, and or coming then to the line. I mean, I haven't seen it so often, so mostly I was earlier finished, and then I lost already 100 spots, and then I don't see it anymore. Or there's a corner, and then I don't see it anymore. But then you're just waiting in the radio, and still cheering and having adrenaline and waiting for the announcement in the radio that he got it. So that was pretty special. This first Tour de France stage when he got.
What I love the most is the intermediate sprints. I love them. Those are so cool. That's like, who's fighting for green or point jersey in that race. Setting up those sprints in a intermediate sprint can be so cool. Like if you watch them, like it's such a fight for those for that jersey, and there you really see who's going for green. As a lead out man, there's the of course fighting for the stage victory. There's the intermediate sprint. There's passing through the mountain stages, calculating the time limit. Making sure you and your sprinter fuel so you recover for the next days. It's just a long journey of 3 weeks, how to arrive on Champs-Élysées. And that's why, as a sprinter or as a rider, I think every rider will have the same. When you enter Champs-Élysées in the Tour de France, you feel proud and lucky that you have the chance to fight for stage victory in the center of Paris.
Definitely winning. And just I said before, executing that perfect delivery. When you swing off, move out of the way and watch them go past, and you always give a big yell, like that was, why you get out there and do that. And once again, like just that winning feeling within a team that we all, as athletes, many athletes, not everyone, some people individual, but most of us pros or have been pro, you strive for that, don't you?
All these things we've spoken about, they're all great. The victories, the success. But probably what I enjoyed the most was the anticipation of having a sprint and the pressure. They're, two different things. The anticipation, you're researching, you're looking at the finish. It's that little spark inside that you're going to make something special happen today. And then the pressure alongside that everybody expects you to be there. They're two things. I think they're the two biggest things that I enjoyed. My sports director, Brian Holm, who is one of the best ever, his line was, pressure makes diamonds. And he'd say it always in the team meeting. And I just love the fact that under pressure, I could perform, but I didn't win. It was the pressure to be in the right time, the right place, and deliver at the right time.
Well, did you take something out of that? Do you think you know the job a little bit more? I certainly loved hearing from all those different guys because they actually explain the job a little bit different every time. I thought I knew the job in and out, but it was just interesting for me just to hear their different opinion about the way they attack the final few kilometres. A big thanks has got to go out to Will Jones, who put this one together, because there was a lot of audio and he's had to work his way through and sort of piece it all together so we could hear the best beats from each of those guys. Spurlo and Meg behind the scenes doing a great job there. And of course, you guys for listening. Like I said at the start of the episode, I'm over here at the Tour de France. I'm reporting with the Cycling Podcast. So if you want to hear a little bit more of my voice, or maybe not, you just want to learn a little bit more about what happened each day in the stage, it's a great podcast to listen to. So head across to the Cycling Podcast and listen to that every day. I've got a talking luft coming for you next week. So guys, until then, cheers.
The music in this episode was composed by Pete Shelley. Cheers, mate.